Velkommen alle sammen. This is another podcast episode with Tom from Survive the Jive. Always happy to have him on the show. He's super educated in a lot of different topics, and today we are speaking about the stone ships. I'll be visiting a couple of these in the summer and doing a little bit more in-depth travel videos and some more spiritual stuff that I'll cover on the Patreon. But this is a great source for anyone who is interested because these are a super important thing, it seems, over our religion for 3,000 years almost. And it's also a mysterious thing. We don't know a whole lot about it. So, a lot of interesting stuff here. And Tom has also released a course lately for everyday people who want to practice heathenism, paganism in their own way. So, I'll let him say a short word about that and then we will get to the podcast.
I just wanted to let anyone know, if you want to practice heathenry and you are trying to figure out how to do the rituals and you're finding it like a struggle going through all the source content and stuff and different like theories on how to do this and that and the other, and you just want someone to like explain in a simple way that you can learn quickly and easily how to be a heathen, I have a course called Starting Heathenry, which is available online, which is an online learning course, which like minimal reading, like broken up into like 5-minute little videos on each topic, so that you can just learn how to do a prayer, how to do a blurt, how to how to incorporate stone ships if you wanted to, whatever, this kind of thing. So very practical for heathens today to access the information they need in a concise form. So yeah, it's Starting Heathenry. If you Google that, you'll find it. It's on Thinkific as a learning course.
Perfect. I'll put a link to that in the description below so everybody can find that there. Velkommen alle sammen. We have another special episode with Tom from Survive the Jive helping us out on the channel today. How's it going, Tom?
Not bad, thanks, Thor. Good to be back.
Yeah, always good to speak. We have a very good topic to speak about today. What I was going to do some traveling to this summer, and you've done a lot of research on it. It's the stone ships that we find all over Scandinavia. And I'll put some images here on the screen and we'll show some video and image throughout the video. But this is what we're going to speak about. So for the new viewers, Tom, how would you describe the stone ships to maybe someone who's never seen them or heard of them before?
Right. You know, stone circles, like stone, like you see in Britain and stuff. Like everyone knows what those look like. Imagine one of those, but instead of a circle, it's in the shape of a boat. That's what it is. And they're found in Scandinavia, and they are it's very complicated to describe what they are, because they lasted for a really long time, 2,000 years, that from the first ones to the last ones, which is a very long tradition. That's like longer than Christianity in most places today. And there were lots of religious changes in Scandinavia during that time. There were lots of shifts were happening, but these things stayed the same. But doesn't mean necessarily that their use and beliefs around them stayed the same. All we know is that they continued to be used and made for 2,000 years, right up until the Christianization of the Vikings. So they originate in the Nordic Bronze Age. And and they are side by side with other boat-related cult activities besides stone boats that should be mentioned too, I think, today.
Have you seen any differences in what happened over those 2,000 years? Are they maybe a different shape, or there's something different about them, or is the frequency that we find them in the archaeology different? Is it more common in a specific time period that you've seen?
Well, they are a bit different. The earliest ones seem to pick. I think the first one's probably on Gotland, a Swedish island of Gotland in the Baltic, and there they start off really tight knit. The stones are touching, so it's more like a boat made of stone in a way. But then as they get as it goes on over time, they get bigger, but also with the stones more spread out, so they're easier to make at that point, I suppose. But they are certainly in later context, in Viking context, they definitely have an association with the assemblies. Whereas, and there's also probably from early dates as well, an association with burial grounds. They're often placed in around barrows or that, but that's something that continues all the time. So that's not really a variable thing, but it's like this relationship to burial grounds is always there. Sometimes with barrows coming after the ships. Sometimes the ships are placed around barrows. Like Eneshög in Sweden has some of the biggest barrow in Sweden, mostly Iron Age ones, with several ships, several of them all around. So there's some connection to the dead, and there's also a connection to a legal assembly. And a lot of them, some of them are even named like in modern day Scandinavian like terms. The name of the ship is something ting something. So they're like always there's an enduring association with the ting, with the legal assembly, but which is also kind of like I know Thor, but in case your viewers don't know, like it's a kind of a mixture of a sort of council, a law court, or a parliament. It's where all like the legal matters are resolved, political matters are resolved, but it's definitely fully integrated into their belief systems because they're placed at where the dead will be present, and they're important places. And of course, the timing of the ting was also religiously significant because they're often on lunar events that would be sacred times as well.
Yeah, super super important that you brought that up too, because the all of those places kind of took place at the same place a lot of the time. The sacred place was there, maybe a holy tree or a grove would have been there, and of course the burial mounds would have been there, but yeah, a bit more a bit less common, at least throughout all of Scandinavia, is those stone ships, and that's also like very related, which we will speak about in a little bit for specific reasons. But where is it? This is something I've not studied so much. Where is it that we find most of them? Are they mostly in Sweden? I know of a couple in Norway, but I don't think any in Denmark or Iceland. Are they most of them in Sweden that you've seen?
Yeah, they are a lot in Sweden. There are none in Britain. There are none in Iceland. There are some in Norway, as you say. There are some in Denmark. But yeah, it's sort of something centered around the Scandinavian peninsula. I believe there are some in the Baltic. There's definitely one in northern Germany. There's one in northern Germany. I just remembered that one. But that's like an outlier. It's just one there. But yeah, it's all around the Baltic Sea and along the Norwegian coasts. So it's connected to the sea. I guess they're not found as commonly inland, but they are inland as well, because Eneshög is quite a long way inland, for example. And on the island of Gotland, there's a high concentration there.
Yeah, yes, Gotland. Okay, yeah. And are they? I know you touched on this a little bit before in one of your videos. Do you think there's any connections to some of the oldest ones, like the ones from the Bronze Age, and then the Scandinavian rock art and the petroglyphs that I'll show up on the screen here? Do you think there's any connection to those, because a lot of them depict boats in a similar style?
I think there's got to be. To go into the context of this topic of the boat in the Bronze Age and in the petroglyphs, or herristningar, they are the most common symbol. They're all over Scandinavia, right? And in Denmark, Norway, Sweden, these Bronze Age carvings of rock art. There's lots of different repeating motifs, solar crosses, footprints, blah, blah, blah. But the one that comes up the most is the boat. And it's a specific kind of Bronze Age boat that was actually discovered. An Iron Age example of it that survived into an Iron Age was discovered as a bog offering called the Hjortspring boat, and there's a reconstruction of it that's been built that you can see. So that shows that this style of boat was continued for a long time, all through the Bronze Age. And the context that they're depicted on these carvings, it looks like they're ritual and also militaristic. So they're often, the people on the boats are often wielding axes, clubs, trumpet, lures, the like bronze horns that were blown in the time. So the boat is a very important symbol there. Now, you could say, practically speaking, that might be because of the fact that the Bronze Age depended on very large trade networks, that the elites of the Bronze Age, who were like the guys in the big barrows, they got powerful because they were able to control the trade of bronze that made like much more highly stratified society than Iron Age Scandinavia had. But there might be something more spiritual involved. And the people at the British Museum, I think, have talked about this, and that if you look at the Bronze Age razors, because it seems that Bronze Age Scandinavians were much more keen on shaving than Viking Age ones were. They apparently shaved a lot because they often have these razors. They have on these razors these depictions of horses, suns, solar symbols, and boats. And it's been interpreted by some people at the museum as this is like a kind of drama, a cosmic drama being depicted on the razors of the sun is carried through the sky in the day by a horse and chariot. And we see also how listening at the petroglyphs depicting a chariot pulling horses. And of course, you have the Trundholm chariot model from Denmark found in a bog, which is a 3D model of horse pulling the sun on a chariot, on a wagon, or not a chariot, but on the carvings, it's a chariot, two-wheeled chariot. And also in the Kivik tomb, the Bronze Age tomb in southern Sweden, you got on the interior of the tomb carved on a chariot with kind of solar wheels and lots of solar imagery. So there's something going on. Okay, we know from Norse mythology, you got the sun is pulled along by a chariot. It's not that unfamiliar to us. But something that seems to have been lost in Norse mythology is an earlier thing where like the sun, because before the heliocentric world model, the Bronze Age people in most regions seem to have believed in the sun going under the water at night. And the Egyptians had similar beliefs like this at the time, right? So the sun is pulled through the sky, and then it comes to the sea, and it goes underwater, and then and then it goes through the underworld every night, and then it comes back up again. So through the underworld, it's like carried in this solar drama. It's like the sun takes it, and then it passes it on to a boat, and then maybe even a fish, because you keep seeing these fish with the sun as well on the razors. So this it sounds kind of speculative and made up, but actually, if you watch like one of the videos about it on YouTube, it's quite a good theory, and it does match up with what other people at that same time in other parts of the world, like Egypt, believed about the sun and its journey. So we know for sure that all Indo-European peoples in Bronze Age Europe were much more like solar focused than later on. Like the Viking religion is not that focused on the sun, but from all the imagery of Bronze Age Scandinavia, it seems like the sun was the most important thing. And not only do horses represent the sun and chariots represent the sun, but it seems like the boat also has this close relationship to the sun, and maybe towards its its evening journey. Now, with all these different things matching up, the razors and the petroglyphs, the fact that at the same time the stone boats occur, first start to happen, it's very tempting to think that there must have originally been a solar significance to the stone boats, even though there doesn't seem to be any later on.
Is there anything, and it's probably a difficult question, but is there anything pointing to how they may have built them in spacing a specific direction, like a lot of the stone circles or the dolmens or things on the solstice, the sun shines right through? Have you seen anything like that in any of the stone ships? Are they facing a specific direction that they've found, or anything like that?
I think people have looked at that, but I don't think the problem is you can see in some in places where there's more than one, like Ennis Herg, that they facing different directions. So it's not like they're all consistently. There's obviously no tradition for 2,000 years of making them face the same way. So, but there may have been. I think some of them might face east. I haven't looked at that in detail. I've seen like no one who's compiled a list of every single stone ship and which way it faces, which would be interesting. But it's sometimes they're hard to date, as anyone who knows with like Neolithic things from much older, they've been really hard to date because you can't date a stone. The only way you can date them is by lifting one up and seeing what's underneath and carbon dating that. But generally when we date these things, we're dating them from the context of what's around them. So a lot of them are placed in Bronze Age fields, and like some of them are placed in Viking Age burials, and you can see they disrupt. Like sometimes they disrupt older burials, and you can see, okay, they must be younger than that burial. But then you can see another one, another burial that's been placed to the side of it to avoid it, and you know that it's older than that one. So it's like dating them stones is annoying because of that. But yeah, there's no like comprehensive like list of all the different datable directions of the stone boat, so that we were able to see like, oh, they used to face this way and then they face this way. There's no data like that.
Yeah, that's a new project for us. But you touched on there a little bit. How often are these actually combined with burials? I know some of them are, but a lot of them are just the stone ship and absolutely nothing is there. How often do we actually find a burial or at least some archaeological finds from around the area?
Very often. So even when, I mean, a lot, even the early Gotland ones have, they can have kist burials, like a stone kist inside, underground, or can have cremation urns. So even when you've got these two different burial traditions of like cremation and burial in the Bronze Age, they're both, so they both can be associated with the stone boats. And then later on, like when they're building stone boats much later in like the Iron Age, the Vendel era, whatever, they are often placing them in burial grounds. So even when there isn't a burial inside them, they're still conscious of their positioning close to burials. So some of them actually, what I'm saying is that originally, even from the earliest time, some of them, a stone boat is associated with a specific burial of a person. But later on, they might not be, but they're always put into a context where they can be near to a burial ground. So it seems like usually they are. There's not always burials inside them. There are, so that well haven't been found. So it's like there's a great deal of variation in what is associated with them. They can be next to a barrow. They can have a barrow inside them. In the case of the largest one of all, in Jelling, it's got a barrow inside it. But I think the barrow was made after. I can just a second. I got the dating of it. But yeah, there's a lot of So the barrow, there's a Bronze Age barrow. It was built around. So it was deliberately built in the Viking Age around 940 AD around a Bronze Age barrow to be in the middle of it. And then there's another barrow next to it, which is Viking Age barrow, I think, which is built after. So is this? There's definitely something to do with the dead from an early date that continues right through the tradition.
Yeah. So is there anything about that we know about what might have been done there? Of course, we see some connection to burials and we see some connection to the thing, but what are maybe some theories as to what they really were for? Is there anything like concrete, any rituals that happened on there, any evidence for sacrificial locations, of course, things other than the name thing that a lot of them are located? Is there any evidence that what types of things actually happened there and what these were really for?
Well, they're strangely absent from any literary sources, as far as I'm aware. There's not a single mention in any saga of these things, which is really annoying because you'd think they'd have some significance. Like one of them might get mentioned by the Icelanders. The Icelanders didn't even want to build in it. So that's interesting and weird. And none of the Vikings who settled in the British Isles wanted to make any there. So the place name is important because like that shows at least that they were used to things in the Viking Age. We don't know. We can't go earlier about. As for like sacrifices, yes, there is evidence of like sacrificial stuff at some of them, and they're often also in the same like context that some burial fields can have. Of like, there's one outside Skivik called what was it called? Well, anyway, there's one just near Skivik, which has like a huge boat, loads of barrows everywhere, or Iron Age ones, not like ancient like prehistoric Bronze Age ones. But there also is stone circle with a stone menhir in the middle called the Peng stone locally, or Penga stone, like money stone or whatever. And there's also a stone rectangle. And stone rectangles are found in Sweden. I don't know as much about them. There's lots of these stone rectangles in Sweden. I was married in a stone rectangle out next to King Bjorn's barrow outside Uppsala, Bronze Age barrow. And that stone rectangle is sometimes known as a kyrk. People called it a church, like in local, names. So that they had a long remembrance of it having a religious significance. It was some kind of church, but it was definitely used for sacrifices because they've got the sacrifice evidence in the ground. And other similar stone circles further south in Scania, for example, there's one called Dices Ting. So it's a stone a rectangle, and it's associated with the Disir and the Ting. So it's very tempting to think that these stone rectangles, which we know were marked out as a sacred area or a ritual area, there must be something similar going on with these stone boats. But obviously, they're not the same thing because they could be right next to each other, as just outside Shivik. There's one stone rectangle and there's one stone boat. So if they were exactly the same purpose, then they wouldn't be necessary to put them next to each other. They have a different meaning. So maybe some of them are associated with sacrifices, but I don't think there's like a consistent evidence of like sacrifices inside them all. And since they're often next to other structures that are definitely used for sacrifices, I'm going to assume that they had a different purpose, of some specific purpose that was unique to the ship shape. And I believe that it's something to do with the transportation. It's because it's a boat. A boat is a form of transport, right? And if we look at the context of, okay, with the Bronze Age razors, if they show this solar like drama of like the journey of the sun to the underworld, right? Okay, I believe that. Maybe you don't have to believe it because maybe it's too speculative. But when we come to like 500 AD, long time after the Bronze Age, the new tradition emerges in burial contexts. Starts off in Norway with just small boats, actually around 200 AD, but was more famous for later like Vendel era and Anglo-Saxon ship burials. Around 500 AD, you get really big ships buried inside barrows. That probably derives from an earlier Norwegian custom of like smaller boats. And why would you bury someone in a boat except that you think they need a boat in the afterlife? It's pretty obvious to me. And we know from the literary sources that the underworld is full of water and that the dead wade through rivers, and that it's probably a useful place to have a boat because it's full of rivers and it's wet and you have to cross those rivers. So having a boat would be great. The other thing is that there's this idea that not just that you need to navigate the underworld with a boat, but maybe it's getting there and back. Although like in all the literary sources we have, the boat is never said to be used as a mode of transportation from between worlds. It's always animals. The gods always come. Hermod and Odin use Sleipnir. The gods usually use horses or some other animal to transport themselves into the world of the dead. Never
those are also in many burials too.
Yes. In fact, all the ship burials have horse sacrifices at the front or inside. All of them in England and in Scandinavia. If you have a ship burial, there's a horse sacrifice with it. Multiple horses sacrificed with them. So one doesn't preclude the other. And that the association of the horses and boats that started the Bronze Age is still there right to the end in the Viking Age. It's still there. There's definitely some connection there, even in the grave things. So I think that also, but what I was trying to get to is that people didn't just leave the barrow, bury someone dead in a barrow and say, that's that, they're gone. That person was always accessible at that barrow through Utasita or other rituals. And the fact that the parliaments, the political meetings had to take place where the dead were present shows that the consciousness of that culture of the dead always being there, at least the dead who are in barrows. So the barrows are called Dalradura in one kenning, the doors of the dead. They're like a constant place where the dead can be accessed and can interact and participate in events with the living. Now, maybe the boat then is not just something for the dead to go away, but also to come back so that they can be present again for events and things like that. That's possible as well. But I definitely think that the boat burial tradition lasts like 500 years, like basically like from 500 AD, roughly. Ship burials, 500 years, boats a bit earlier, but like proper ship burials, that last 500 years of heathenism up until Christianity. And that last 500 years is the last quarter of the 2000 years of stone ships. So the stone ships and ship burials continue as well together. But the ship burials spread out much further west. So you get ship burials in England in Anglo-Saxon era, and then the Vikings spread ship burials to Scotland, and I believe there are some in Iceland too. So ship burials much more dispersed. Even it's described by the Arab Ibn Fadlan that there's a ship-based funeral in the Rus. But so the ship burial and ship funeral tradition doesn't last as long, and it starts much later, but it spreads out a lot. Whereas the stone ships are very they last for a lot longer, but they are concentrated in a smaller area, and the Vikings don't spread them out like they do the ship burial customs, ship funeral customs. But there seems to be there's got to be some relationship, because the symbol of the ship has its purpose in their religion, and I believe that it's to do with the transportation to the underworld, and that would match up with the transportation of the sun to the underworld in the Bronze Age too.
Yeah. So yeah, that was that covered my last two questions. Really, all that talk. That was the last one. So that's what I thought immediately as well. It was another example of possible sympathetic magic, as we call it. That people maybe get in that ship, maybe they do their rituals, or they get into a meditative state, or whatever, and something like that. They do that in the stone ship, in hopes that makes it easier to make a journey to the underworld, or to have a contact with the dead, by the dead coming into this world. So that's always what I thought of them. But yeah, that's about it. We covered pretty much all of our questions quickly. Is there any ones that you would recommend that the people go visit? Any of the best ones that symbolize it the most?
I visited lots of them, and you can see a lot of them in my video about Nordic stone boats and boat cult. But there are some other things I can say about this. But yeah, the best ones to visit, the biggest one is one I haven't been. The biggest one of all is Jelling in Denmark, which was Christianized because Harold Bluetooth, who had it made, or like the barrow made there, like it's right by the Christianization monument, so like it became a Christian site, and it still is now. So it's kind of like cancelled out its original function in a way. But the best one, my favorite one I've seen are all in Sweden, and they're the Arlesterner, which is on the south coast of Sweden, overlooking Denmark. That one is amazing because it's on the top of a cliff looking out, and it's from, I think, around 600 AD. So it's like, Germanic Iron Age, but migration era, Folkvandringstid, but it's still in use in the Viking Age in 1000 AD, and it's really cool because it's just the sea is there. It's so present with the sea, and that's why I like it, because a lot of the others are quite far inland, so you don't have the sea right there in that context. But it's not in as far as I know, that's not a burial ground, so that's quite unusual in that sense. It's right on the cliff, but it's a very famous one, and it's marketed as Sweden's Stonehenge to get the tourists there. It's also the only one I've been to that there's tourists. All the others, there's loads of them all over Scandinavia, and you go there and there's no one there. Enenturg is amazing because it's the biggest barrows. It's right in a grave field in Sweden, and there are lots of stone ships there. And also there nearby there is a Troyborg labyrinth that you can walk through as well. So there's so much cool stuff from there. And also, if you're going to Gotland, then there's loads there. But Kjellvar's grave is one of the oldest ones. It's also really cool and impressive, and it has the association with Kjellvar, who is Thjalfi in Norse myth, Thor's servant. So it's believed that he was buried in that boat. So that's a cool one to visit too.
Perfect. Yeah, well, one more question I thought of now, that's before we finish. Is there any, like you said, there are so many different ones and they're in different locations. Have you seen any common things as to the locations between all of them? Like you said, one was on a cliff, some are on the coast, some are very far inland. Is there any kind of common things that you have noticed visiting all of these that tend to be present at most of them?
I haven't done like a geographic survey of their placements, so I could notice that. But I mean, I had looked at the similar thing for ship burials in England and Sweden, and there is then always near to a river. So the barrows with ship burials are never far from a river. So it may be that because they had to drag the boat out the river to get it into the burial, to put it in the barrow, or to the sea. I don't know about like the Norwegian one, the really famous Oseberg. That one probably near the sea, I guess, or is it near a river? But yeah, it might be that might just be for the practical fact, but also it could be for another practical fact that it wants to be conspicuous to other seagoing or river-going merchants, Vikings, other people who are using these highways, like of the ancient of the Germanic world, the river systems and the coastlines, to go around, and they want to be seen. That's simple. They want their barrow to be seen. Same in ancient Greece, like the barrow of Patroclus is built on the cliff looking over the sea, so everyone can see it. Quite a simple explanation. It might have a religious explanation, but I think maybe simple is easier in that context. But yeah, I think I wanted to say that as well, like the thing there are some mounds that are called tinghöger, like the thing mounds, because they have a big flat area, like a barrow. It's a barrow but with a big flat top, and those kind of barrows are believed to have the barrows that everyone stood on for a thing. So we know that the barrow can be this, like, the doors of the dead, or that people can spiritually visit the dead through a barrow. And if we imagine that they wanted to have the thing there for that reason, then we can start to think, okay, also if we look at there's none at there's a tinghöger at the Uppsala, but there's no stone boats. But at Enenshög and other places, there are stone boats, and you can imagine people gathering in the stone boat exactly the same way as they would gather on a barrow, with barrows all around. And when they go, as you said, they like enter like a trance or whatever, and by entering this boat, they imagine that it's only like a representation of a boat. It's just some stones on the ground, but it becomes functional as a boat to move to the spirit world, to the other world, and then to begin the profane proceedings of, like, the court of law or parliament or whatever you want to call it, but in such a way that with the aid of this boat, they are present with the dwellers of the underworld.
Perfect. Yeah, great topic. Thank you so much for coming on. It was one of my favorite things to talk about, because we have so little literary evidence for it. There's no literary evidence for the stone ships and what they were for. So the archaeological evidence and brainstorming and putting together ideas like that's the things I love most. So thank you very much for coming on, and I hope everyone enjoyed.
My pleasure.